2019, Sierra Leone was 8th on the Global Climate Index. That shows that Sierra Leone has suffered enormously from climate change and its effects. We lost thousands of lives in the mudslide in Sierra Leone, and also in flood-related cases. We lost a good number of Sierra Leoneans there. So this is the more reason why we, the members of parliament from Sierra Leone, are particularly concerned that we pay more attention to the NDCs to make sure that we meet the Paris Agreement and Article 4.2 of the Paris Agreement, which makes it mandatory on all parties to come up with the NDC. Now, of course, a country that has suffered that much from climate change will not underestimate the essence of the mitigation, adaptations, loss and damage, technology transfer, climate awareness, capacity building, and research, because these are all embedded in the NDCs. And if we follow them strictly, I'm sure will help to mitigate or reduce effects of climate change in our country, and by extension reduce the subsequent loss of life in our country. Well, I want to at this juncture state that parliamentarians are fully involved in the planning and stage of the NDC, and even in the consultation stage. There are regional consultations that are done. Stakeholders in all of the regions in the country are involved, and parliamentarians are part of the committee that go to talk to stakeholders in every region. Even in the validation stage, we are involved. Up to the final updates, we are involved. I'm pleased to inform this very meeting that last month we just updated our NDC last month, and basically Parliament played a tremendous role in the previous NDC, in terms of legislation and in terms of some legal reforms, in making sure that we yield to the Paris Agreement. Just because the last NDC was from 2015, and from 2015 to date, these are some of the actions we've taken as a country, or as a parliament, in ensuring that we meet up to the NDC. Yeah, in 2019, we established, the Ministry of Environment, because previously there was no Ministry of Environment. It was blended with another ministry. But after having seen the effect of climate change and see how we have lost life in our country, we came to the realization that we should prioritize climate change and we should ensure that we mitigate it properly. So a separate ministry was set aside, to create the institutional framework and to establish for improving the coordination of bodies responsible for environmental management and climate change. Also, similarly, in 2017, we enacted the Sierra Leone Meteorological Agency Act in 2017. The essence of that very act was to ensure that we create the capacity to collect meteorological data to enhance climate information and early warning signs. Because if we have this early warning through the meteorological data we have, we can be able to prevent some of the effects of climate changes in our country. So our parliament was very, very, very much concerned and expeditiously enacted that act. And also in 2017, there was transformation of the National Meteorological Department to the Sierra Leone Meteorological Agency. So for any department to be transformed to agency, it has to be endorsed by Parliament. And our Parliament was extraordinarily proactive in ensuring that we did that, so that we allow greater synergy and cooperation with similar institutions, and the world as a whole. And also in 2021, which is this year, development of the validation of the initial National Adaptation Plan, the NAP, which also creates greater access to existing adaptation funds and to enhance a long-term building of the country's adaptation capacity. One thing we have always had as a country is also the finance to ensure that we help to mitigate, the effects of climate change. as a country up till now, we have not been able to get the national implementing entity. Well, I'll come to that later in the program, just because of obvious reasons. And as part of the NDC and as Parliament's requirement, in 2019, there was the development and adaptation of the fourth General Poverty Reduction Strategy Paper, PRSP, also known as the Medium-Term National Development Plan, which spanned from 2019 to 2023. We've already gotten that plan. And it creates opportunity to align the NGC to this plan and implement resilience building projects also. The establishment of the Renewable Energy Directorate in the Ministry of Energy. The Ministry of Energy never had the Renewable Energy Directorate. We ensured that we enact, we established that directorate this 2021 in order to ensure that they facilitate, the switching of the available renewable resources of energy, And also the establishment of the National Disaster Management Agency. As a result of the mudslide, the flood, there was no National Disaster Management Agency. So we decided to establish it. And the one of the terms of reference of that agency is not only to be reactive, but it's also to be proactive. So they have the capacity to foresee potential disaster and advise government or take the necessary action. And they also provide a timely intervention to respond to disaster in terms of the preparedness and response to disaster, including those related to extreme weather events. In 2021, which is this year, we review the disaster management policy to update and bring in line with the NDC, because the disaster management policy was not in line with the NDC. So what we did was to make sure that we align it with the NDC, because the NDC is a commitment we've made as a nation, and we should be committed in ensuring that the contents of the NDC are implemented under every circumstances. And also in 2020, the development of a capacity development plan for disaster management. We also developed a capacity development plan for disaster management, and then we did that categorically to strengthen the capacity to prepare and respond to disaster. The development of a new act for forestry, wetland management, and conservation of wildlife. That was in 2021. We came to the realization that at a point in time, government was highly dependent on the export of timber, for revenue generation. So when budget debates are taken to Parliament, those of us who are in Parliament are part of this committee, ensure that we did our level best to tell government that we should not be making money from timber, which is against the Paris Agreement, which is against some international conventions that we have domesticated. So we diverted government attention from making money from the export of timber to fishing or to other industries. So in order to protect, the forest. And the revision of the National Climate Change Policy and the Climate Change Communication Strategy. As I'm talking now, the climate change policy has almost been completed. We have had the last meeting last week, so we're coming up with a policy that will be validated very soon, a climate change policy. And all of those are contingent on our commitment to the NDC. That is why we're doing that as a nation. And also we have the development of the third national communication to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have done that in 2017 to establish an incremental baseline and report on countries' emission, because the emission rate, basically we have committed ourselves as a nation to reduce the emission rate, the level of emission. Our target for 2025 is to reduce it by 5%, and then 2030 is to reduce it by 10%, and 2050 to reduce it by 25%. These are our commitments as a nation, and Parliament also is particularly concerned with legislations that are geared towards reducing emission. So whichever agreement or bill or act they take to Parliament that geared towards increasing emission will not be allowed because of our consciousness of the deterioration of our climate and the effects that climate change has had on our people, in our country. And also in 2020, the National Appropriate Mitigation Action, a vehicle to implement mitigation measures, was also established. And then in 2017, the National Biodiversity Action Plan was set up. And while we set up this plan, we did it deliberately to enhance carbon sink, to do conservation of biodiversity, And in 2016, development of the renewable energy policy. We never had a renewable energy policy. So what we did in 2016 was to develop one, because we have to have the policy before we go to the implementation proper. So our Parliament was able to develop the renewable energy policy to guide the transition to low emission technology. The off-grid solar energy strategy also was developed in 2020, that will enable access to the wider populace to clean and cheap energy. The National Renewable Energy Action Plan was established in 2016 to implement actions that geared towards a low emission development pathway. And finally, we also developed in 2015, no sooner the NDC was formulated, we developed the energy efficiency policy. Up till now, it helps to facilitate technology transfer to cleaner energy. But like I said, these are the actions we took contingent on the agreements we made in the NDC. And as I'm talking now, we have updated our NDC last July, and we currently have an updated NDC, which is in my possession. So going forward, we have areas that we have looked at, and we have areas that we are focusing at as a nation to help reduce emission. But like I said, a lot more needs to be done, because we cannot achieve all of those things without the appropriate climate financing. And the process of establishing a national implementing entity has been a problem in our country. Problem in the sense we have approached banks, we have approached private institutions, and all they are saying is that the bureaucracy involved in establishing, in becoming a national implementing entity are so protracted that they don't have enough time and commitment to go into this. Like, for example, evidence of projects that you have undertaken, the integrity of the organization, all of those. So basically, if I could give some of the updates as to how far we've gone as a nation in implementing the NDC, this is what I have to say.